From a world unknown comes a nightmare unimagined.
And get into your mouth and you walk around while they incubate. You think they're dead.
We have something on the monitor, Captain.
That's okay. Go get them.
The good news is your dates are here.
What's the bad news?
They're dead.
Maybe we could drown it in A1 sauce.
What is this thing? Very ugly. Remember the good old days when guns killed people?
Zombies, exploding heads, creepy crawlies. We could have a little problem.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Hey, we're getting up at like 7 in the morning for you guys now.
Yeah.
We're working hard. So please do it. Thank you.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an honor shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we've been coming up on 2 years of bonus episodes. So
wow, that was weird to say or weird to hear.
Yeah, we've been going. It's surreal now. We've been going at it for a while here. But so if you haven't made the jump yet, there are 40 plus bonus episodes waiting for you over there. And speaking of which, we do have, I think, 5 new people who signed up this week. And they are, I think, Edward, Colin Estes. I might have even thanked you two on last week's episode. Yeah. Anyway, you get the double shout out. No complaints here. But then we also have David Ryman, Ross McWilliams, and Dustin Easman.
Nice. Thanks, guys.
So thanks so much for joining us and getting all those extra episodes. That's the one plug for the week. The other plug for the week, as always, is iTunes. If you guys have been digging the show, give us a good old rating and review over on iTunes. Helps us find new listeners, and we appreciate that as well. But now that that's out of the way, hi, I'm the host. I'm one of the hosts. I'm Josh.
I'm Jamie.
And that's Jamie. Sorry, we're a little out of it this morning.
Yeah.
We have woken up and haven't had our coffees yet, but we're here and we're going. We are back this week. Obviously talking more sleazy movies. I think 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you guys would have heard from us free listeners. And we would have had special guest film programming assistant at the New York Film at Lincoln Center, Maddie Whittle. And she brought with her 2 films specifically addressing snuff films and voyeurism. That was 1960
those were a lot of fun.
Peeping Tom, directed by Michael Powell, one half of Powell Pressburger, more of a prestige filmmaker, who basically killed his career to make the first De Palma movie.
Yeah. So we appreciate him for it.
So thanks, Michael Powell, for doing that.
For ruining your entire
a masterpiece, and we talked about that alongside 8mm, Joel Schumacher's
Nick Cage, baby.
version of Seven, starring Nick Cage.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting conversation. If you want to hear that, again, that was 2 weeks ago, Indie Podcast Listener of Choice. But last week, because of the release of Dr. Sleep, which Jamie and I still haven't seen yet, but I know some of you guys have. Hope it's good. We're going to check it out at some point here. But in honor of that, we did, finally, the big one, The Shining. We tend to kind of avoid the real big ones that everyone's already talked about or seen a million times on this show. We like to kind of uncover some stuff. But every once in a while, we got to do one. Oh, yeah. So we did The Shining, and from 1980, Stanley Kubrick, obviously. And we paired it with its Australian counterpart from 1982, directed by on the opposing end of Kubrick, someone who was not known at all for anything, Tony Williams.
Not at all.
But Next of Kin actually is an incredibly underrated horror film, very moody, very dreamy, has an
incredible finale.
Yeah, an amazing synth score by one half of Tangerine Dream on that.
So good. And then that cool accidental explosion at the end of the movie.
Yes, they accidentally triggered an explosion too early and got a one take in the final shot completely by accident. That works amazing. And I think Jamie said it.
So good.
It was a combination of the ending of Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the ending of like any 80s action movie you've ever seen.
Yeah, where just something explodes.
Yes. So if you haven't seen Next of Kin, or you just you want to hear us talk about The Shining and Next of Kin together, that was last week's bonus episode for Patreon listeners, and that was a pretty big one.
Yeah.
So again, Patreon.com.
I think we did like an hour on The Shining or something like that.
As one does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast will get you that episode. But this week, pivoting off of hitting up our rare Australian film that we hit up, we have Australian friend of the show and Australian correspondent with us, and 3-time returning guest, and to be fair, and also the only returning guest coming back for his third time.
Third time, yeah. You've beaten whoever comes back again. You've already beaten.
He's taken a victory lap. He's already got the record. He's going to hold that record for longer. We have,
it's incredible, of
the Bunta Vista Socialist Club podcast. We have Andrew Law. Andrew, how are you doing?
Hey guys, I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Oh, we're doing pretty good. I mean, this is why we're up so early. We're up so early because we are here with Andrew, who it is actually super late for.
Yeah.
But
I think we got like some double daylight savings happening.
Yes.
And it's
we have Australian and Canadian daylight savings at the same time. Things are crazy.
Yeah.
But we're all here, and we're all here specifically because Andrew, for the third time, has brought 2 films with him. Because as a regular visitor of the show, as well as a listener of the show and a patron of the show, he's always got ideas for us. And I had never seen either of these 2, so we'll let Andrew introduce both of them. So, Andrew, what 2 films have you brought with you this week, and why do they pair together?
Oh, these movies are a treat. They're a true treat for the senses and the mind. Yeah, I guess, well, the previous times that I was on, the first time the theme was, I guess, sort of Australian cult movies. We had Razorback and The Long Weekend. The second time was kind of rock and roll themed cult movies with Streets of Fire, which absolutely whips ass, and Wild Zero. Everybody loved Streets of Fire. That is good stuff.
And I loved Wild Zero.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say, honestly, a lot of our patrons really loved Wild Zero, too. I saw them talking about it in the Discord recently, where they were basically like, some people were going back and listening to that episode and being like, man, Wild Zero is just absolutely insane.
Yes, it is.
So Jamie's opinion has stood the test of time more than mine so far.
That's right.
Excellent. So this week, I guess I just wanted to pick some of my absolute favorite cult horror kind of movies that are just straight out my favorites because they are just really fun, and I think they're both just legitimately, sneakily good movies, like good comedies. But yeah, I guess the theme that sort of joins both of these is horror buddy comedies, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're both fronted by a duo of wisecracking friends. They both have a lot of very sort of snappy, fast-paced dialogue, and they're both, like I said, I think they're both sort of quite underrated. I'd never really see a lot of people talking about either of these movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, so one is 1986's Night of the Creeps, directed by Fred Decker. Which is about 2 friends who accidentally unleash a plague of alien zombies in their university. And the other is 1988's Dead Heat, which is basically a buddy cop horror zombie comedy, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way that I would describe it is it's Shane Black's Reanimator.
Okay. For sure.
Yeah, and there are multiple Shane Black connections throughout these movies.
Mm-hmm.
So there's I think the other thing that you really get from both of these movies, apart from like I said, clearly having an interest in actually being kind of having really sort of really fun characters that you actually like to see throughout the movie, which is not all that common for horror movies. A lot of the time with horror movies, they're deliberately setting up like, teens as being disposable, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
These very likable characters, but I think both of them also have a really strong sense of the people making them having a great love for horror movies themselves. They both seem very, very full of references to other horror movies. Both of them feature older horror movies playing on TVs in the background of movies, or characters making direct references to those.
Corman connections as well.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So yeah, I think there's a real vibe that I get from these of both the people making the movies enjoying making the movies, which always makes a movie fun to watch, I think, but that they also just genuinely love the horror movies of the 50s, sort of all the way through. And they're both prime kind of 80s stuff. So love them.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing today, and I think we're going to jump right into it. We are going to start here with Night of the Creeps.
Let's do it.
They are a new breed of terror.
Freeze!
They are a different kind of horror.
Zombies, exploding heads, creepy crawlies. We could have a little problem.
The creeps are taking over.
I got good news and bad news, girls.
The good news is your dates are here.
What's the bad news?
They're dead.
You have never had a night like this. Night of the creeps. If you scream, you're dead.
All right, we are talking Night of the Creeps, the 1986 American sci-fi horror comedy film written and directed by one Fred Decker. This was also his directorial debut.
Oh, nice.
The film obviously is a bit of an homage to kind of B-movie genre movies of kind of yesteryear, a little bit of 50s sci-fi, a little bit of old school comedy, kind of updated with obviously the sort of 80s effects craze that that went through there, and
plenty of split open heads and slugs.
Yes, every character in this is named after someone that he was inspired by. So if you're curious what directors he's sort of mimicking here, you can see it in the one character who is named James Carpenter Hooper.
Okay.
One girl's last name, I think she's just Cindy Cronenberg.
There's Cynthia Cronenberg. There's Detective Landis. There's Sergeant Raimi, Officer Craven, Officer Bava,
Detective Cameron. Oh, there's a Bava in here too.
Yep, Officer Bava.
Wow.
And of course, the other main character's name is Chris Romero.
Yes.
That's
which
awesome.
obviously it also takes its title from Night of the Creeps, Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
Same deal. This is also a zombie film in its own way, but it is kind of a genre-bending zombie film as well.
Yeah, I mean, even the very opening with these like baby alien looking things running around.
I'm going to be honest to you, the opening of this is my favorite part of the... I mean, I also really like the climax, but I'd say like the first 5 to 10 minutes and the last like 5 to 10 minutes were my favorite parts of this film, because this opening, which starts just completely out of nowhere with what is very clearly little people in alien costumes running around, and there's a whole history implied in this scene that you never ever get to find out what really happened, but you have some idea of one alien, presumably a scientist, goes rogue. He's running around with a giant canister of something ominous, and he's running through, and there's subtitles both for us and then also alien subtitles.
Which I feel like that really sets the tone for like the kind of playfulness of the movie, is the alien subtitles up the top and then in brackets the human ones, but like the English subtitles underneath.
Yes, and so clearly there's been some sort of dividing situation happening between these aliens, and one launches the canister out of the spaceship and down to Earth. And as it's flying down to Earth, and with this is very clearly, you know, sort of like a campy 80s sci-fi thing going on.
Yeah.
And when the canister falls, we switch to black and white. We are in 1959, I think. And then you get, you know, a riff on like a really old school kind of teen horror movie. It reminded me a little bit of Chuck Russell's The Blob.
Yeah,
just
for
in
sure.
black and white.
Even like just the thing being sent from space too, and they see the meteor crash and all that, you know.
But there's the two lovers sitting out at, you know, Lover's Lane. They're listening to the radio where it's like, the sanitarium has reported a missing patient, a psycho killer out there, and he's
and meanwhile there's doo-wop music on the radio and all that, you know.
he's on Route 66 headed for Corman University. And then the next thing we know,
classic hook hand story, you know.
Exactly, but then merged with, you know, a very we'll say explicit gore sequence when the canister reveals to have some sort of slug inside that takes the boyfriend out, and then the killer, I guess, chops up the young girl, axes the hell out of her while she's in the car. So I gotta say, like, I was pretty into this, like, kind of like right off the start.
Yeah. And to make that cool stylistic choice of, you know, it's black and white. They're given that 50s vibe, and I wasn't expecting that either. Especially with the beginning, you have the aliens, and then you have this 50s thing, and then it goes into the 80s vibe.
Yeah, it's almost like one film like enters the universe of another film.
Yeah,
like it's a very interesting, like, stark style transition going from the alien sequence in space to directly into what feels like sort of like a 50s sci-fi teen movie.
Right.
Like honestly, it feels like the 50s Blob for a second.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and there's even the other references to some classic 50s stuff as well. Like one of the girls at the sorority house that he picks his date up from is asking one of the other ones, have you seen Plan 9 from Outer Space, which came out in 1959?
Exactly.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, the famously atrocious Ed Wood film, Plan 9 from Outer Space, which also I think is also the film that plays on the TV later, that gets blood on it when the old lady's watching it on TV.
Oh, right, yeah. I think I remember seeing it's the I don't know her name in the movie, but she's the tall black dressed woman.
Yes. But shortly after that, it switches all the way to 1986, present day, when this film came out. And it turns into a bit more of what I would say is kind of like Andrew said that it was kind of has like a bit of a buddy scenario going on, but it honestly felt to me more of like a teen coming of age / sex comedy,
like the nerd
scenario.
trying to get laid a little bit.
Yeah, like a little.
It turns into some more like romantic kind of stuff rather than just him trying to get laid, but it starts that way.
Yeah, definitely.
That's his motivation at first.
I mean, a lot of the plotting in the first half of the film involves like sororities and pledges and the two geeks trying to, you know, get with the girls that they like, or the one trying to do that and the other one just
the other
being
one
there
just
to
kind
help.
of being supportive.
Yeah, so it's got like already the first like 15 minutes of this film, we have some 50s sci-fi, some Plan 9 from Outer Space. We have Corman University, obviously a reference to the late great Roger Corman, who, you know, was a producer and a filmmaker on all kinds of controversial 50s films, and also had a keen eye for talent and hired some of the great, you know, filmmakers we know now. Someone like Joe Dante got his career started working for Roger Corman. So they have a university named after him for obvious reasons in this film. But then also you get, you know, kind of like a bit of a teen sex comedy, Revenge of the Nerds style thing happening, though not necessarily some of the sour aspects of that, but and then also you get introduced to, as the slugs start invading people's brains, as they do, you get introduced to a little bit of a body horror zombie film, a little bit of an infection horror film too.
Yeah,
like Cronenberg's
it feels like a bit of a Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
type vibe
too, which is, I guess, also a 50s sci-fi movie that was also remade, I want to say, in the 70s.
Yeah, I think late 70s.
Yeah. And I guess like I definitely get struck with this film by just how sort of snappy the writing is between a lot of the characters. Like for me, there's a lot of very genuine laugh out loud moments of dialogue in this stuff, and just the interactions between people, like around the start of the movie when they go into the frat party to try and follow Cynthia Cronenberg when they first see her. And JC is trying to encourage Chris to stop being a bummer about some girl that he broke up with and go and try and, you know, meet this girl that he's looking at. And when they go in and talk, and JC goes over to interrupt the conversation between Cynthia and this jock, and says, oh, hey, there's a phone call for you up the front. And the guy just goes, whoa, thanks, dude. And, like,
Very Bill and Ted moment.
Turns and walks off. Yeah, like there's a lot of really good dialogue in this thing, which I guess is sort of one of the Shane Black connections for me, because apparently at the time that Fred Dekker wrote this, he was best friends with Shane Black.
Oh, nice.
And he originally set this as a writing exercise for himself, where he said, I need to write a movie, and I'm going to write one in 7 days. And if I don't finish writing a movie in 7 days, I'm throwing it out. And if I do finish, I'll make it. And this is the movie that he made after writing it in 7 days. And then after this movie, he went on to direct Monster Squad, which he co-wrote with Shane Black.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think I definitely get that sort of sense of that Blackian sense of just putting a lot of kind of fun, snappy dialogue all the way through things, you know?
Yeah, well, and it makes a good connection with Dead Heat, which was written by Terry Black, Shane Black's brother, and
really?
also has a cameo by Shane Black in Dead Heat.
Oh, wow, I didn't even notice.
One of the first times he ever appeared on screen, if not the first time he actually ever appeared on screen.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome.
So yeah, both of these have that kind of, are aiming for a bit of a witty, buddy, snappy, I think is
still
the right
also
word.
Mixed with like that violence too, because when it starts ramping up the horror, they really go for it when it comes to the makeup and stuff. There's so many split heads in this movie, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I would say that the one thing that I don't know totally works about Night of the Creeps is I would say that, because like you're right that they definitely go for the gore effects, but they definitely always treat kind of the situation, I find, kind of like a bit of a joke.
Sure.
Until more gross things kind of start happening. I would say until the friend dies in the bathroom, things are kind of pretty light, I would say.
Yeah. Like the kills aren't taken like too.
Even though some of them are pretty gruesome. Actually, I think the thing that's taken the most seriously, and the thing that I appreciate for, sort of being, this has a whole kind of winking vibe to it the entire time.
Yeah.
Like again, it's sort of riffing on, what it thinks are kind of like bad pulpy 50s movies, like movies that were poorly made because of limitations.
Right.
And he's clearly sort of mimicking something similar because he has, an affection for it. Like he likes those kinds of movies, so he's affectionately re-rendering them. But there's a subplot here, because we've talked about the 50s sci-fi, we've talked about the buddy teen movie, we've talked a little bit about the zombie horror, but the fourth genre that's thrown in here is the best. And this is the detective pulp subplot with the amazing
it's a hard-boiled cop.
Yeah,
subplot.
This is like the third time we've talked about this guy,
and
too,
Tom
right?
Atkins, who obviously famous. He was in Escape from New York and The Fog, and he was the lead in Halloween 3, which Jamie and I already talked about on the show, and which I personally just like love that movie and love his.
Oh, and I guess we haven't talked about him twice because we just watched The Fog.
But we did watch The Fog, which is
we didn't review it yet.
The other Carpenter that he was in.
Tom Atkins was also in Lethal Weapon, Shane Black's first screenplay.
Yes, he was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so Tom Atkins, I think, gives the best performance in this film as the sort of aged, cynical detective who actually lived through the 50s scenario that we watch. And we find out that he was the cop who was first at the scene, and it was his ex-girlfriend who was butchered in the car.
Yeah, we find out through this this dream, which is also black and white again, and when he approaches the car too, it's pretty visceral. Like there's a lot
and that
of
dream
violence.
starts with him relaxing on the beach, but then his girlfriend rises out of the water, and she's not wet. And so there's something off about that immediately, and then his dream transitions into him finding her corpse, and then I think it transitions one more time before he like wakes up, because it's I think it's the zombie holding the axe looking at his face, or like this rotting corpse looking at him. Yeah. And then it's this really intense, sweaty close up of him as he wakes up, and he's just like, "All right, we got you a cryogenic corpse to go investigate." And he's like, "All right, I guess."
And so this ties into the teen frat shenanigans plot, because in his attempt to impress Cynthia, Chris attempts to pledge a frat, which is also fronted by Cynthia's current boyfriend. Is it the Bradster?
Yeah.
Platinum blonde, convertible driving, exuding just wonderful douche energy. Brad, and he says to them, what can you offer? We've already got all the good pledges. What can you offer us? And the thing that they decide to task Chris and JC with is stealing a corpse and putting it on the steps of one of the frat or sorority houses. And they wind up going down to the medical building, stumbling their way into an experimental lab which contains a cryogenic experiment. And who should the body be in there but the teen from the 1950s
who got the slug in the brain, right?
Who got the old slug invasion. And they pull him out of the big unnerving
Which,
thing.
by the way, weird pledge initiation, right?
Yeah. Find a corpse.
Yeah.
It was like the trophy thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was reminded too. I
guess this one's a little more morbid though.
We just did a sorority babes and the slime bowl bowlorama, where the sorority pledges have to go steal a trophy from the local bowling alley, which has a jive talking imp. Inside of it that helps them win bowling
are
tournaments.
Just the most random things you have to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, 80s movies had a weird idea on what pledge initiations were, and I'm glad I had no part in that.
They try to steal the body, get freaked out, and run. But somehow the body gets up and makes its way away from the scene, but not without killing the lab technician that was there first. And this is what then brings the detective into the piece, Detective Cameron.
Mr. Tom Atkins, who shows up on the scene and is just kind of like an asshole to everyone. That's his thing. And I mean, also they deserve it, because I think they say that they were like, okay, so how did the corpse just leave? They were like, yeah, well, two of us went to the washroom at the same time. And they were
they Epsteined it.
Yeah. we just weren't watching. The cameras were off. Guards were asleep. Yeah. Who knows what really happened? But the corpse got up and left. And yeah, after kind of that situation, it is just the cryogenic slug man walking around, killing people, infecting people, and the kids sort of being the one.
He goes back to the sorority house where he was meant to pick up his date.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Of course.
He's got priorities. Even as a killer slug zombie, Keeps to a schedule.
Yeah, man.
But unfortunately, his head falls open and a bunch of weird alien slugs come out, freaking out all the girls.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
As it would,
man.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and also he goes to the sorority house and they happen to have a bunch of brains in the basement because they need the brains
for their science experiments. Yes.
Yeah. They were just like, I mean, I guess you could keep it here, but put it in the basement.
Yeah, these zombie slugs really landed in a prime spot,
Yeah. Yeah, and also as that corpse walks out the door, I liked the joke where the one cop is like walking by. Oh no, it's not when he's walking out of there. It's when the one guy is
the lab tech is walking, has sat up out of the autopsy room and is leaving. And the guy just walks past him and says, "Yeah, have a good night."
Yeah, see you tomorrow, man. Yeah.
Look up.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty good joke. But all of this kind of starts coming to a head because it's formal season, man.
Yeah.
So, as the zombie infection is kind of ramping up and slowly taking its victims and adding people, at one point it takes out an entire bus of dates of all the men.
Yeah, and I love too. It's the like watching the bus crash, and then I think it cuts to something else briefly, and then goes back, and every single passenger is just rising up as a zombie, just ready to go.
Yeah, and so that's happening while like the only three people aware of what's happening are our two buddies who de-thawed the corpse in the first place.
Yeah.
And then there's Tom Atkins who is on the case, and though he's not 100% sure what's happening here, it is revealed obviously sort of as we've mentioned that he was someone first on the scene as sort of a young patrolman to the original Psycho attack and the boyfriend getting slugged in the brain from the 50s, and that has sort of traumatized him. And I thought that his arc, or at least his kind of wide-eyed, kind of wiry, traumatized character arc was kind of like the most intense thing that was kind of happening.
Yeah.
And because he's the most kind of grotesque, like, actual person in the film.
Yeah.
Because the two kids are obviously just, trying to protect people. They're trying to figure out kind of what's going on.
They're like first-year college students. I mean, they're really just trying to figure shit out here.
They get traumatized by Tom Atkins telling them the story about how he actually
killed the murderer.
He killed the murderer. By the way, not by showing up and the guy was hacking the girl away, but the guy actually was never there. He was already gone by the time he arrived there.
So he finds him.
He hunts him down.
Shoots him in the head with a shotty or something like that.
Yep,
like
and then buries him and doesn't tell anyone ever. And the kid's just like, so beyond like confessing to a murder
and hiding it.
Yeah.
You're gonna help us, right?
But it's just like one of the like most like purest Psycho moments like in the film is just when like Tom Atkins reveals that I just straight up murdered someone.
And it's tense too. It's like closing up on his face. He's sweating, and then Chris is just looking at him like, dude, what the fuck?
Well, yeah, he just kind of has like a whole like cynical, like suicidal energy to him. At one point, he actually is just gonna blow up his own house with him inside of it.
Yeah,
he turns the oven on for those purposes, and it's not until
I very much liked how his whole sort of plot unfolds, because he has like they initially kind of introduce this stuff to you through a series of dreams that he wakes up from, and each time you kind of see a bit more of what was happening, like what he saw, and it becomes very obvious that he is just completely haunted by this thing.
Yeah,
and it's ruined his life,
Well, and what's the line he gets to? He's like, he's like, you're still pursuing your high school sweetheart. My high school sweetheart got hacked up by a nutcase with an axe.
Yeah.
So it's like it's basically having you sort of reimagine the version of this sort of like coming of age teen comedy type scenario that's happening with this kid, and he's just like, now imagine that infected by like a grotesque horror film. And I feel like that's what this film is going for. But I feel like, and my take for this is I felt a little bit weaker on this one in comparison to Dead Heat, but it was mostly because I felt like the movie wasn't taking that premise as seriously as, and I mean, it's obviously a comedy film,
for sure,
but the sort of like the pain of that, of like you're in something that should be a lighter film, and then all of a sudden like your high school sweetheart is killed, something like that, your best friend is killed. I feel like I didn't quite feel that as much for the kids as I did with Tom Atkins' character. I felt like Tom Atkins really hammered home like the soul of that, because I think he's just a really good actor. And he
almost like he was in a parallel movie to the other characters at points.
A little bit, and but also like they do gesture towards it a little bit with the kids. Like the one friend is really upset when he finds out that his other friend is killed, and he hears that tape of the kid that he made for him telling.
And it's really heartwarming too. I mean, he's straight up just like, "I love you. Good luck with Cynthia." It's just like, oh man, like it's really heart wrenching, and also the whole time having his character really prop his friend up and try to get him with the girl and all that. Like, he was one of the most supportive friends that I've seen in some of these films. So
he has that line earlier on too, where he's just like, you're my friend, and like it's important to me that you're happy.
And he even gets mad at him, where he's just like, dude, I keep trying to help you and you don't appreciate what I do for you, all that. So it was pretty heart-wrenching to watch him go.
And I do wonder if just pacing wise, the way that JC's character works out is that you're introduced to him at the start of the movie, and he's like cracking jokes about everything and making light of everything, he's very, very cavalier in like pushing his friend to pursue this girl that he's seen, very actively going out of his way to kind of help him and everything. And when they do get freaked out by trying to steal this body and bail out and go back to their house, he does have this monologue of you're all depressed about this girl and I want you to brighten up, so I go along with everything that you want to do, and you want to join a stupid frat, and I'm like, I don't really want to do that, but hey, if it might make my pal happy, I'll do it. And they say we got to steal a body, and I'm like, hey, we'll try and make the friend happy. And he's like, you're miserable about everything, all I'm trying to do is help you, and you're just a downer about all of it,
Yeah.
And like the fact that his character does die sort of 2/3 of the way through the movie makes me feel like his I guess emotional arc is a bit accelerated in the movie.
Yeah.
Like it feels like that monologue happens very early in the film.
No, that's
true.
That's true. I was watching it with my buddy, and when we were watching it, he said, "This feels like the thing that happens at the end of the film,
where he's
the
really
third
trying
act,
to motivate the
third
troops.
Well, yeah, it feels like the third act, like a near breakup fight between the two
you gotta
friends.
go out and you gotta ask the girl.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, that whole thing.
But I guess the other thing that's, to me, I guess minorly noteworthy about this movie, just in terms of like representation, because one of the things that I often like it's very hard to avoid watching older movies without watching them through like the lens of how we think about things today. Like Revenge of the Nerds is a great example. The whole scene at the end of that where he kind of has non-consensual sex with the girl in order to win her over. And she goes, "Oh, cool."
Hasn't aged well.
Yeah. You were good at it, so it's fine.
Yeah. If you were bad at it, I would feel differently, but instead, it's cool. So, obviously something like that aged very badly, but it's also interesting to me when you watch an older movie and you go, that was actually quite reasonable. And so Chris's friend JC has crutches and he's disabled, but it's kind of not really a pivotal point in the movie about anything. Like it kind of comes up in a few minor contexts of
mostly like bullying. It seemed like I remember there's one scene where Brad trips JC, like trips his actual walkers that he uses. So like,
although like,
and the only other time it comes into play of the actual film is when he has to crawl through the bathroom stall.
Right. Which I mean, that
I actually thought that was. I honestly
effective.
think that was one of the better horror sequences.
I agree.
Just because they seem to take the physical threat a little bit more seriously as he's, putting the match underneath, burning up the slug, and then trying to crawl away. But he can't get away fast enough. The slugs are still a little bit faster.
Yeah.
Well, there's also the bit right at the start when they're trying to steal the body, and obviously he's not helping try to carry the body. He's just like, is that heavy? It looks heavy. But, and he kind of makes vague reference to it in his monologue where he says, I figure I'm never going to get laid, so I might as well help you out. But as far as like, it's not a thing that is played for jokes at the expense of the character. It's not I guess as well, it's not the defining feature of him as a character, in the same way that when you watch a lot of older movies, like the gay best friend's entire character is they are gay.
Yeah.
They are like very, very camp, and that's it. That's their whole personality. Whereas, I just thought it was interesting to see a movie from the mid-'80s where one of the main characters is disabled, and it's not really a big deal in the movie.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, just an interesting thing to think about, I think. But like as you said, Josh, it kind of things start to kind of careen out of control as the slugs start to spread to more and more people, turning them into
I do, and I think that this and both Dead Heat use a little bit of the same gag, though I think Dead Heat does it a little bit better. But they use that gag where the cops are just laying into the zombie as much as they can. It even does like that sort of like zoom dolly like Jaws effect as Tom Atkins is realizing that like the thing's not going down, and there's like 5 of them all laying at it, and eventually he whips out the shotgun and shotguns its head off, and all of the slugs like scurry away out of his head, which is one of the more impressive effects in the movies. I also like how it interacts with Tom Atkins, who has that line where he's like, creepy crawlies and a date to the formal.
That could definitely be the tagline, you know.
But yeah, these slugs, they enter through people's mouths, they incubate in the brain. is the big thing that they do. And yeah, they take over the entire bus of dates of all the men heading to the sorority to pick up all of their girlfriends for the formal, and then it is up to Chris and Tom Atkins, who is at that point, just after confessing murder to a child, has decided that that's it. He's gonna end his life. He's like, you know what?
This was the point where Chris, comes back to his room. So this is after CJ's been in the bathroom with a bunch of these slugs scooting around, and Chris comes back to his dorm room and finds the tape recording that CJ has left him, saying, "There's one of them inside me. I don't have a heartbeat anymore." It's like it's a mortifying thing to find on a tape recording.
Yeah.
And he goes to Detective Cameron's house to say, they got my friend and they're spreading and everything. But when he gets there,
well, and also telling him that he's not crazy, right? Like Tom Atkins' whole thing is that he's the only one who really believes that there's something
going
like
on.
really almost supernatural carnage happening.
Yeah.
Well, he kind of believes it before the kids do.
Yeah, no, he does. Well, and that's just it. So I think when the
yeah.
kid hears it's killed his friend, and his friend is telling him, sort of expositorily all the rules about how they finish them off and all of this, that re-energizes him, because at that point he's about to commit suicide. But it's not until Chris shows up at his door and is like, "You're right. There's something here. They got my friend. We need to fucking burn their shit to the ground."
Yeah.
But also, he rouses Cameron to come and answer the door, who looks like he's been drinking or something. and yeah, like like obviously you don't sort of put it together at first, but when he comes over to the door, he tears this duct tape from around the frame of the door before he can open it. And I'd sort of thought, oh, is he trying to stop the brain slugs from getting in, but instead Chris is there and he says, they killed my best friend, and they're everywhere and we got to go and do something about it. And he goes, right, this shit is real. Goes over to his bed, gets out his pump action shotgun and his shells, puts on his classic detective trench coat, and while this is happening, you sort of see all of this, a lot of him putting on his coat and stuff like that, with a shot where you just see him kind of from the shoulders down and a bit out of focus. And in the background, what the camera's actually focused on is the oven, which is open with the gas going full blast.
Yeah.
Because apparently he had just been in the middle of killing himself.
Yeah.
Yep.
But again,
That's
like it's like you said, I think if if the movie sort of tonally was played a bit straighter, I think a lot of those scenes would be even more affecting than they are. But even
see,
as they are,
I think with the Tom Atkins character, it walks the perfect line of like he's a little bit
within
of
this movie. You
yeah,
mean?
like he's a little bit of like a caricature of a detective, but they take, and Atkins, at least as an actor, takes the emotional pain of his character very seriously. So even though that's technically a gag, it's a really dark fucking gag.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the stuff that really worked for this film. Like almost everything with Atkins, he really only gets like 15 minutes, 20 minutes of this film. Like everything with him like worked like gangbusters on me.
Yeah, I agree.
It was mostly like the kids stuff, which is just a tiny bit weaker than that. And then they obviously are the ones who have to uncover the plot that we kind of already know. Like the movie kind of engages you as an audience member, and you know these genres, you kind of know.
So you're watching the characters uncover.
Yeah, you're watching the characters uncover it, and they don't uncover it until that kid doesn't go up to Atkins until like the final 15 minutes of the film.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It
takes them a long time before the kid believes kind of like what's happening in the film. Although when they figure it out, and the final 15 minutes of this film are spectacular.
Oh yeah.
And I knew they were spectacular when it opened with Tom Atkins taking him to the gun inventory, where Dick Miller is there. Obviously, we've talked about Dick Miller cameos.
Was he
and
in
everything.
Chopping Mall?
He was in Chopping
He was
Mall,
the janitor,
another film
right?
that was very inspired by Dante. So everyone who's ever worked with been inspired by Dante, who was again worked with Corman and was inspired by Corman. Dick Miller was actually the lead in one of my favorite Roger Corman films, A Bucket of Blood. So like
cool.
Dick Miller was like an icon to anyone who worked in kind of like this independent, low budget kind of schlocky horror scene. Yeah, he was in Gremlins.
Right,
he had a cameo appearance in every Dante film.
Right.
Basically.
Okay. Cool.
Apparently there are deleted scenes from Dead Heat.
Yes, I heard that.
That were cut, that were like restored in later versions, but Dick Miller was in one of them.
Yeah, Dick Miller was supposed to be in Dead Heat.
He's
He
just everywhere.
shot scenes. Well, and also in Dead Heat they have the Dante pharmaceuticals. So like
Right.
they're referencing Dante as well.
Yeah, just a lot of weird little connections between these two movies.
Yeah, I mean, both obviously are just inspired by very expressly by Roger Corman, who was like the godfather of 50s and 60s like genre movies, both sci-fi, horror. Roger Corman, we'll get into it, he literally is the producer on Dead Heat.
Okay. There you go.
But Dick Miller shows up in this gun inventory at the police station, and this joke is amazing, where he goes up and he's just like, you know what, man? I need a flamethrower. And he's like, all right, I'll go check and see if we got one. And of course they have a flamethrower. And what is it?
Damn
Dick
right.
Miller has the line. He's just like, old snub nose just ain't good enough. Huh? You really need to just light them off. And yeah, like that bit got me. And he doesn't have the requisition forms to actually get it, because why would there be requisition forms?
Giving it to him.
Well, yeah, because why would there even
I love
be?
that the problem is that he doesn't have the forms. It's not.
It's not that why would a detective need a flamethrower in the first place? It's
not the proper paperwork.
Yeah, you
man.
need the proper paperwork, bro. So he just points the shotgun at him and says, "This is my paperwork," basically.
Yeah.
But they get the flamethrower. They head to the sorority house where the dates are already sort of attacking everyone, and there is a pretty good gag too, where Brad, now a zombified slug alien, but the girlfriend, Cynthia Cronenberg, doesn't realize. She grabs him by the hand, she sits him down, and starts having a heart-to-heart with the zombie.
Starts breaking up with the zombie. Before...
He doesn't take it well.
No.
Throws a slug right into her mouth.
Yeah. Before Chris shows up, lights him... Tom Atkins shotguns him in the head and explodes his head in tandem with Chris, who ignites the flamethrower and lights the slugs on fire so they can't scurry away. Right in front of her, who she thought was her live boyfriend.
Okay, so she actually doesn't get slugged.
No, she doesn't get slugged.
Okay. I think what I was thinking of was when the dog slugs Brad. That's what I was thinking of. But also when
The dog
Chris
slugs Brad.
yeah. When Chris flamethrowers Brad, I will note that he seems really happy about doing that. Like really, really stoked that he gets to flamethrower Brad. Like he was just waiting for that excuse, you know?
Yeah, which is actually like a pretty funny thing, that he's obviously inflicting carnage and he's pretty stoked about it.
Yeah,
meanwhile,
beaming.
she's horrified because she didn't even know that he was a zombie.
Yeah, it just looks like Chris came up and started flamethrower Brad. Oh my god, what an evening.
So yeah, that's just a pretty good gag too.
I guess it is worth noting that there is both a zombie cat and a zombie dog in this movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
But all the girls are pretty horrified that all of their dates are being shotgunned and flamethrowered because they are actually zombie alien slug men. And Tom Atkins gets this iconic line as he's running in there, and he's like, all right, good news, everyone. Your dates are here. Bad news, they're dead.
He's just so gung-ho on his delivery of everything in this movie.
Oh man, Tom Atkins, I think, honestly,
he's the man.
He really sold this movie for me front to back. Because, like, I think that there's good stuff happening in this movie, like, in the peripheries anyway.
Oh, for sure.
But it really was Tom Atkins' performance of the character. It's just a perfect merging of character and actor.
Yeah.
Where he's just selling all of it, even the silliest
and with
stuff.
like the film itself, just like we were talking about how he's such a more serious character than everybody else. Like his backstory,
right? Even though he gets
dark.
like a silly one-liner, or he gets like he gets this,
and it doesn't seem out of place either, which is nice. They do pack it in well. So
yeah. And then the finale is just a giant set piece where they take out all of
flamethrowers and zombie slugs.
At one point, he gives Cynthia the flamethrower. She gets to go a little ham for a little bit.
She even has like this adorable look with it at one point, like as she's flaming people. It's very funny.
Yeah, you could tell that they kind of ran out of things to do at a certain point, though. They even said that they weren't really sure what to do, so they were just like, "What if we just do like something with the shed or something?"
Yeah,
we'll just.
So it's like
they had to get to that lawnmower kill somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So they're just killing. They spend the rest of the movie just killing all the dates, basically, as Tom Atkins kind of leads them into the basement where all the brains were. They were attracted to all the brains in the basement, and Tom Atkins does the big old sacrificial explosion.
Now, I will say that my interpretation of the earlier moment in the film where he's getting ready to kill himself.
Mm-hmm.
And instead he goes, all right, I'm suiting up and we're going to go take these things out, was that was his moment of redemption, where he decided I'm going to go and finally, sort this thing out that's been haunting me for my entire life. Because at the end of this movie, he says, he clearly sort of goes, I'm going to go down in the basement and I'm going to light this place on fire and blow the whole place up with me inside it. He's very clearly planning on continuing the act of killing himself, but he's going to do it in a sacrificial way that actually does something rather than just killing himself. He's killing himself at home rather than dealing.
I was going to say, he basically kills himself the same way by turning the gas on there, basically.
Yeah, I'll just go over here and do it. Save people while I do it.
Exactly. I'll also take out the weird alien slugs at the same time. And he does do it, to be fair.
It's the darkest two birds with one stone I've ever seen.
Meanwhile, the teens kiss outside.
Yeah. Because you got to have the classic 80s romantic.
Now, I heard that there was two endings for this film. So,
oh, really?
So which endings did you guys get? I got the ending where Tom Atkins' corpse walks out of the house, bursts open with the slugs, and they run into the cemetery.
Is he also smoking?
Yes.
Yeah, which is the best part of that.
Oh, I had the other one.
Yeah, so there's two endings. So Jamie and I watched the one which has the alternate ending, which is we got
slugs explode out of his head into a cemetery.
Into the cemetery where then the alien spaceship from the beginning UFOs them up or something.
Yeah, or is looking for them.
Or is looking for them. Yeah,
because they're trying to be like, we probably fucked up. Maybe we should get these back to our planet.
Yeah, so Andrew, am I correct in that your ending had something more where they're kissing, but then the dog who caused the bus accident comes up to Cynthia, and then it shoots the slug at her, and then it cuts to black, I think.
Well, the dog is walking through the crowd of people who are outside the burning frat house, the burning sorority house, and the two of them look down at the dog, and then you get a point of view shot where the dog opens its mouth and the slug comes right out at the camera, and it cuts to black.
Okay.
All right. I don't know which ending I prefer. I mean, here's the thing. As we're pivoting to the reductive rating round, I think part of the reason I don't know which ending is because I don't really know that this movie is like about a whole lot of things. It's just it's a fun genre riff. That's kind of what it is.
I think it's taking a bunch of different genre riffs and then putting them together.
I don't think either of those endings has particularly more meaning than the other ending. I guess is all I'm saying.
What I will say is I think the one that we watched goes in line with the tone of the rest of the film a little better.
I did like watching Tom Atkins' charred corpse walking around
with smoking a cigarette while he's dead. I think that it adds a little like personality to such a just an odd movie already. And then to have it end with an alien spaceship spotlighting a cemetery looking for slugs.
It's a cool image. Like the final shot, I think is awesome. Of a giant wide shot of the cemetery the slugs just went into with the spaceship.
But I mean, I always do also like a very, nihilistic, just like it's still going on and then cut to black and there you go. But I think just with this film, it feels like that weird ending would work a little better. But I don't know. I haven't seen the other ending. So.
Yeah, we'll have to check it out. But I think I did actually end up preferring this alternate ending here. But I will say that overall, I had a good time with this one. It was interesting that Andrew brought both these on because both of these do kind of have a bit of a lower reputation. But when Andrew brought both of them, it was curious to notice that Night of the Creeps actually has picked up more of a stronger cult following.
Yeah.
Like the average rating for it are much higher than Dead Heat, and its sort of reputation has been growing over the last few years. I guess there was an updated Blu-ray that came out not that long ago, like maybe a few years ago, people have been kind of rediscovering it, I think. And it is a solid genre riff on, again, sort of old school campy 50s sci-fi, as well as sort of teen comedies, sort of a pulp detective story, as well as sort of zombie horror, infection horror. Got a little bit of Cronenberg shivers in there, as I kind of said. And I do think that it's very fun, but I did watch the most of it being kind of like, I'm not getting a whole lot out of it other than Tom Atkins. Tom Atkins, for me, was like the soul of the film, mostly because it takes the genre bending and it affects his character in a very like psychological way.
Yeah.
Because again, he's just like, I should just be a patrolman or a detective in a fucking cop movie. That's what I should be. Instead, I'm dealing with fucking alien slugs and psycho butchers and like things that like, make my job more difficult.
Yeah, so he's dealing with this very real cop traumatic past, but then having to deal with this just over the top science fiction nonsense.
So being being a detective who's dealing with all of these other genre universe things happening around him is actually hugely impactful to his character. Like, it's horrifying.
Yeah.
And it's really sad.
That's what works for me the most.
It's really sad, actually. And I think that it works really well. And I kind of wish they found a way to incorporate the teen coming of age stuff a little bit more into that. Because there are hints of it. We talked about that bit where he gets to light up the jock and he's stoked. Yeah. And he's like basically murdering Brad. And he's stoked about it.
He does the same thing with Steve, too, the other jock. Yeah. He's lighting up, real happy about it.
Yeah,
seems.
like
and even the movie
like
kind
that
of
bit
plays
is not like, obviously that's still a joke, but again, it's a dark joke, and like that to me has an underpinning.
And
of
even the movie
grosser.
kind of plays it like this was his becoming a man moment.
Yeah,
it was like murdering two jocks with a flamethrower. Now you're a man. Now you can ask that girl out.
Yeah, in front of the girl too. And she's traumatized. So like I think that is like the closest this movie gets to doing something interesting with them.
For sure.
But the rest of the movie, a lot of it is just kind of them figuring out what's happening or trying to like it's more of like a teen comedy where the kids are kind of like, weird things are happening. I wonder what's going on. And then Tom Atkins every once in a while comes in and is like, fuck my life.
So dark.
20. I really do think that scene is so perverse where he confesses that I hunted that guy down and just murder him.
And Chris is just sitting there like, I am traumatized now.
Well, yeah, he has a great line. He's like, is there a point to this story other than wanting to confess to a murder?
Yeah. We going from somewhere here?
Yeah. So for me overall, I think the film's gonna get like kind of like a high 3, because I did have a really good time with it. And and I do think that like Decker, has affection for a lot of things that I also have affection for. But I do think that Andrew pointing out that he wrote the screenplay in 7 days kind of speaks to maybe why some of the character writing of some of the teens doesn't necessarily translate into something doesn't translate into something much more than kind of like what's there on the surface.
What it is.
Exactly. Whereas I do feel like he must have identified a little bit with Atkins' character as being kind of like a guy literally pulled from the 50s sci-fi into the 80s horror film.
Yeah.
I feel like he kind of identified a little bit more with Atkins' character, and he realized something in there that was like, very interesting to watch. And Atkins, obviously a very good performer, and actually finds some soul in that character in the middle of like what is just some sort of like campy riffing on all these different kinds of genres. Here's an actor like going for it.
yeah for sure.
And you gotta love Tom Atkins for that. Like no one else would take something like a role like that. You feel like other actors who would have been cast in that role would have just played it for the silliness. And
sure.
he really just does not. So yeah, gotta say, Atkins MVP, some great genre riffing going on, and some pretty good gore effects for the zombies in the final set piece. And I gotta say, I do love that opening too. The smash cut from little freaky aliens that are very small, kind of waddling around, sending slugs into space, followed immediately by like 1950s.
And then jump into the 80s stuff. Like you have these like 3 genre switches. I agree with you. I think I could see this becoming the 4. I was hoping to get another watch in before we talked about it, because I did get 2 in for Dead Heat, because I had the similar thing where I'm like, I think I really like this, but I'm not quite sure I want that other watch. But for now, I'm going to give it the high 3. But I pretty much agree with everything you said. I think Atkins is the most intriguing part of this whole thing, and having it's weird though, because it almost requires the movie to have all of its just kind of more surface level 80s stuff, so that Atkins' character works within that. Like his character wouldn't have been as intriguing if he wasn't the only one doing that as well. I feel like him being the only one kind of giving this kind of performance makes him stand out in an odd way. But I mean, we'll never know either way. So yeah, I thought it was great. The effects are awesome. The split heads and then watching these slugs just slide out of them and slither around was pretty effective. And
there's some real good stuff in here.
Yeah. And then once again, the finale with Chris just kind of beaming ear to ear while he's destroying all these jock zombies was very interesting. Yeah. And the weird ending I also appreciated. I do think that alternative ending that we watched probably works a little better, but I haven't seen the other one, so maybe that one does.
Well, based
too,
on the final shot, I think that the final shot that we watched is way
it just
weirder
works so
and more
well
interesting.
Also with the opening, just having these weird genre
coming back and
fusions.
Referencing the aliens, although it is probably hilarious to watch this movie and never see the aliens again. Also, like it's probably super weird to be like they just never brought that up.
Just drop them off and then leave. Yeah,
that's it.
It's just somebody else's problem.
Yeah. But for you, Andrew,
so we're out of 5.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go 4. Just
all right,
nice.
Due to my great affection for the movie, I think it's
I mean, you're definitely not alone. I was looking at it, and the majority of people that I know seem to like really, really like this. So I was actually a little disappointed in myself that I was like, I'm hoping on rewatches I can get something more out of it. I think it's just my fault for having an aversion to like teen sex comedies from the 80s. It's really not a movie I've ever cared for, and there's a bit more of it in this movie than I expected.
Yeah.
But sorry, Andrew, go on.
I was just going to say, as I said at the start, I think it's obviously shows a great deal of affection for the types of movies that it's riffing on. All the subject matter, like you said, the naming of all the characters. Obviously, he's just trying to pay tribute to things and people that he has admiration for. I think you get a real sense of that in the movie. And just generally speaking, I think it's just sort of intended to be fun, which is no crime. No crime in my book.
No, absolutely not.
It actually reminded me a little bit of, because they did that too with Final Destination, where they named all the characters after. I mean, it always kind of takes me a little bit out of the movie.
When you notice every single person's name.
Well, one guy in Final Destination is called Billy Hitchcock.
It's pretty on the nose.
Well, yeah, and then another one was like Terry Chaney and like Alex Chance Browning. I mean, they're going for more deep cut directors, I guess. I mean, not really Hitchcock, but like Browning is like Universal Monsters director. It's not like Cronenberg. It's not like it's not as quite as obvious as something as like what they're going for here. But for some reason, every time I do that, I'm just always just like, I don't know that it was necessary. You probably could have referenced Cronenberg without like calling her Cynthia Cronenberg. But it is very clear to see that Fred Dekker, he is a very avid horror fan and likes a lot of stuff that I also like.
Has he done anything else of note?
The big one that he did other than this was Monster Squad, I think.
Oh, okay. And that's the one with Shane Black, right?
Yeah, so he directed Monster Squad with the Universal monsters in it. He also did the pretty much a universally panned RoboCop 3.
Oh, yeah, I think I saw that when I was looking up stuff.
And he got a writing credit apparently on that new Predator movie, which I thought was really bad. So
me too. That's a bummer.
He did write Ricochet, which was directed by Russell Mulcahy, who did Razorback.
Oh, hey.
Oh, cool.
Which is Ricochet's a pretty fun kind of.
Oh, it's got Denzel Washington in it. Okay, I'll check.
Yeah,
it out.
Denzel Washington and John Lithgow as a serial killer. I think, as was just a big-time murderer. He did some episodes of Creep Show, but just as a final aside about Fred Dekker, I will wrap it up with this tantalizing bit of trivia, which is that apparently in 1988, him and Shane Black worked together on a final draft of a script called Shadow Company, which was the first script that Shane Black wrote in 1984, a year before he wrote his first draft of Lethal Weapon. The script was to be an action horror film about a group of U.S. Special Forces soldiers who died during the Vietnam War, and years later, after their bodies are brought back, the soldiers, who are members of secret army experiments, rise up from the graves as rotting, unstoppable zombies. The movie was going to be directed by John Carpenter sometime in 1989, produced by Walter Hill, who also did work on the script, with Kurt Russell in the main role, but it was never made.
What the hell?
That's devastating.
That's just unfortunate.
What a powerful combination.
Yeah, things that could have been, man.
Yeah, for real. That's unbelievable.
Well, apparently it's just one of those scripts that float around and people love to read and pore over and everything. So there you go.
Yeah. Oh, so like that's one that like even fans have had access to that script now. That's what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess Carpenter must have went on then to do. What would he have done instead there? He probably would have done Big Trouble in Little China, or like They Live probably would have been one of the ones he did instead.
Yeah, I think They Live's 88, isn't it?
I'm just thinking if he was planning on working with Kurt Russell.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess it could have also been after Big Trouble in Little China, which is a good segue actually into. We are gonna move along here. That was. Night of the Creeps from 1986. We're going to be back and we're going to be talking Dead Heat from 1988, which I do think has a sequence that feels like a deleted scene from Big Trouble in Little China, which I can't wait to talk about.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about now, yeah. Wait, let's do it.
So let's get into it.
That's it. From now on, I'm a vegetarian.
How do you fight this thing?
Maybe we could drown it in A1 sauce.
Treat Williams
Sit down.
and Joe Piscopo are Dead Heat.
You shoot them, they don't die.
You can't keep a good cop dead.
All right, we are back and we are talking Dead Heat, the 1988 American buddy cop zombie comedy film directed by one Mark Goldblatt and starring legendary Treat Williams. And I will not at all use the word legendary, Joe Piscopo. My first Joe Piscopo movie, and hopefully my last Joe Piscopo movie, even though I do think he's funny. He's funny he's funny to me in an anti-comedy way, which I think is partially intentional on part of Terry Black, who is obviously, we mentioned, Shane Black's brother. But it's very easy to tell, queuing this up, that this film, they picked both of these actors kind of out of nowhere. Because, like, you watch, you're thinking of, like, the best buddy cop movies. You think something like Lethal Weapon.
Yeah.
Even on the lower rent side, you might think of something like Tango and Cash. You're like Stallone, Kurt Russell. You're thinking, so like Mel Gibson, so you're thinking of these huge actors, and then you get a version of this with just actors that aren't that big. And I feel bad for Treat Williams, because this was following up shortly after Hair by Milos Forman, which he was actually nominated for his performance in that film.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then after that, he kind of didn't get to do a whole lot. He showed up in
Is there a reason?
Once Upon a Time in America. Honestly, he was in Spielberg's 1941. I honestly think,
as much as I really did enjoy this film, I am surprised to hear that he was nominated and then did this movie. I will say.
Yeah. I mean, we should say that Dead Heat is like pretty barrel scraping trash, I would say, in terms of premise.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talent who ended up working on this film, and I think that this film works like gangbusters, actually, for what it is. But really it was very clear, being produced by Corman. They gave them like $4 million, which is like nothing. And they were like $4 million to make even just to make a buddy cop action movie is not enough. Like, they didn't, and so the fact that this works at all is kind of insane, and especially because they really couldn't pull very many big actors for this film. The biggest actor they got was Vincent Price, and he appears to have appeared in the film because it probably took one day of shooting.
Right. Yeah.
They were like, we'll give you one monologue, we'll give you one scene where you don't even have to get out of bed.
Yeah, we'll shoot it at your house in the morning when you get up, man. Yeah. Don't even have to go.
But, and as much as that sounds like I'm shitting on the movie, I will say I honestly did actually end up enjoying this more than even Night of the Creeps.
Yeah, I did too, actually.
Which was surprising to me. And I think,
me too.
I think it's mostly because the technical behind-the-scenes craft they actually hired for this film is so much more than it deserves. Like, there's a version of this film that doesn't work at all. And I think it's just made by people who don't give a shit. But the fact that this was directed by Mark Goldblatt, who his only
everyone
other film
seemed like they were on the same wavelength in this movie. Even Joe Piscopo or whatever his name is,
who is just he's mostly known because he was on
I feel
SNL.
Like he had a very difficult part to play, which with those lines.
Oh yeah, those lines are dreadful.
Pulls it off, in my opinion. Like, I don't think it's gut laughter, obviously.
No.
But it's so 80s and so cheesy that I got a kick out of it, to be quite honest. And I think that his performance is good because he somehow pulls off the lines that he pulls off.
Well, I thought he pulled off a couple of them, but there were a lot that I don't think that
I get eye rolling.
He pulled off.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, but I don't know, man. There's something about him that there's a charm to him when he does all this. And also,
there's one scene where he tries to switch to emotional, and it doesn't work.
Is that when he loses his partner?
I was thinking in the scene in the library where he tries to be like he does some variation on a cop's version of "Keep on keeping on, brother" kind of deal, which is very like
is that when Roger is running away and he's kind of like
yes, and he's going after him, and he's just like, oh man, come on, bro, like, they said that only bad cop is a dead cop or whatever, or something like that, or he has some sort of line where Joe Piscopo tries to switch to the emotional best friend role, and it doesn't quite work. But also, it's in the writing.
Joe, though, for me, it was the writing.
The writing,
It was I had never found Joe to be a bad actor.
Right.
You know, I was honestly
I guess it's
impressed.
hard to blame Joe because
I thought he was saving the bullshit dialogue that he had to do. To be quite honest.
I think there's absolutely jokes that he gets given where it's his delivery that's saving them.
Yeah. And I'm not when I say saving them, I don't necessarily mean like I'm laughing hard.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm accepting them more than if a lesser comedian did them. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Right. Well, I've never seen Joe Piscopo in anything else, so it's very possible that I am taking the lines that he's being delivered and my eye rolling at those is reflecting on eye rolling at him. So don't totally disagree with you guys there at all.
Yeah.
But
on the Mark Goldblatt front though.
Yes.
So he only directed this and
Punisher.
the Dolph Lundgren starring Punisher movie from the 80s.
How is that, by the way? Just real briefly.
Never seen it.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of Dolph Lundgren shooting ninjas in that movie.
All right.
That sounds good to me, yeah.
But
I'll watch for sure.
But Mark Goldblatt, primarily known as an editor.
Yes.
And movies that he edited, absolute treasure trove of cult classics. Let me bang some of these out.
Well, and I was going to say first, he started, though, literally editing movies for Roger Corman.
Oh, okay.
And Joe Dante. He edited Joe Dante's Piranha and The Howling. Those were two of the first movies that he did.
Cool.
But but go off the heavy hitters because they're big.
So we got Halloween 2. We got Nightbreed. We've got Commando. We've got Rambo First Blood Part 2. We've got The Terminator. We've got Terminator 2 Judgment Day. We've got Predator 2. We got Super Mario Brothers. We've got Shane Black's The Last Boy Scout.
Yep.
We got Showgirls. We got True Lies. We got Starship Troopers.
Yeah, unbelievable run of as an editor.
Yeah, that's
even
nuts.
all the way up to Chappie. He's still going.
and past Chappie, he fucking did the Eli Roth Death Wish. That was his last gig.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's a bit of a bummer.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, I won't blame his editing. I don't think the editing's the problem with that film.
That's not the problem with that film. So good job still, brother.
Yeah, and the film also shot by Yeoman, I believe, is the name on him. Robert D., who is Wes Anderson's cinematographer.
Oh, wow.
Shot Grand Budapest Hotel, Moonrise Kingdom, Royal Tenenbaums. Like,
holy shit.
So,
doesn't really come through in this movie.
No, not quite. But it's very clear that they have a talented photographer, they have a talented editor turned director. And I will say also the effects artist for this film, because obviously the effects, I think, are really what ended up selling this film for me, because they are not just good, like they're fantastic.
Yeah, I was shocked.
Yeah,
especially
for such a cheap movie.
Yeah, especially a specific scene. Well, you know, I'll save it. We'll go through a little bit of the plot first because it's deep in.
But this guy did the special effects for The Fog. He did the special effects for American Werewolf in London. He did the special effects for Videodrome, Big Trouble in Little China, Predator. He ended up doing
all of this is making so much sense, especially when we eventually talk about a certain scene in a China shop.
Yeah, and he was so good at doing these like practical effects that they would later kind of hire him just to do like specific scenes in certain stuff. Like he actually did Doc Ock's makeup in Spider-Man 2.
Oh, cool.
And the effects for that. He would go on to do the Freddy's death sequence in Nightmare on Elm Street 4 Dream Warriors, which I haven't seen, but you've seen that.
Yeah.
Is that a particularly effective death sequence?
If it's the one I'm probably getting a bunch of the endings mixed up, but if it's the one in a church and he explodes, that might be one of them.
Could be, but okay. Well, he also did the effects for Chuck Russell's The Blob.
Oh, sweet.
From the 80s.
Wow.
So, like, we're talking about, he did The Blob and this and Return of the Living Dead Part 2 all in the same year, the makeup for it.
Hell yeah.
So, like, this guy is absolutely insane, even, like, to this day.
Always covered in fake blood.
Yeah, even to this day, he's still working on stuff. He just worked on Nicholas Winding Refn's Too Old to Die Young series. And Under the Silver Lake, apparently. He did the gore effects for that.
Yeah,
so that head smash-in is pretty fucking great in that movie.
Oh, yeah. That would be him. That's his art right there.
So this guy's incredible, and it really cues us up for like what's going on in this film, which is as I mentioned, I would call this Shane Black's Reanimator because it is like a perfect merging of like the Lethal Weapon, Tango and Cash style buddy cop film.
And in that regard, it has I love when they cut to their chief and he's just like yelling at them. It's
the most
super cliche.
Yeah.
Like it takes all those.
It's like, you guys are loose cannons, but you get results.
And then of course the one guy's just like, hey, you should be giving me a medal. I saved their lives. Like making joke like these corny 80s jokes. Oh, it's beautiful.
The movie is like 82 minutes and it starts like hot. Like it starts with a bank robbery where zombies are robbing a bank.
Yeah, and I love how it's filmed too. They have all these close-ups of the zombies while they're in their car, and they're just like, "Get the bag! Make sure you grab the gun, you son of a bitch!" Like shit
it's
like
these
that.
intense close-ups. They're all sweaty.
Yeah.
The shootout happens like right off the start. They're just driving in like this really flashy red convertible. Joe Piscopo is in like a leather jacket. Supposedly
doing
undercover,
like drum beats,
not
eating
taking
a hot dog seriously. Yeah, didn't tell them that they were going undercover.
Joe Piscopo's character, Doug Bigelow, is just immediately a piece of shit.
Yeah,
He's just
Doug Bigelow too.
Beating on the dashboard, eating a hot dog.
Didn't even tell his partner they were going out for undercover work.
Yeah, it's just it is such a. Go ahead there, Andrew.
Oh, I think it's just very important that we note that Treat Williams' character is named Detective Roger Mortis.
Yes. Which is the level of comedy we're dealing with here.
Absolutely.
Detective R. Mortis.
What does that make you think of? Makes me think of rigor mortis.
Exactly. Genius writing.
Good stuff right there. Yeah, Terry Black, he walks that line, I think, of he's very clearly writing some awful jokes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he must be aware that these jokes are really bad.
That's what I see, and this is what happened with me. The first half hour, I wasn't sure. Like I was like, wow, this is really fucking cheesy, like really corny.
Well, because they're always riffing. They're riffing all the time. And you're like, just stop riffing for a second, man.
Right, yeah. So as it goes, and it was kind of like as the plot moved along, the jokes that were so corny got better for me because the movie itself got more crazy. Like it got crazier. So all this cheese didn't bother me as much anymore.
Yeah.
When they were just doing like the traditional cop stuff like when you don't know much about the zombie stuff, I wasn't as into it, right? Because it's just the typical cops kind of shit for a little while. As soon as they start getting into the resurrection machine and the like three-nosed big biker guy that they fight at the hospital or whatever, I was like, okay, I think I get what you guys are going for. It was more of a satirical thing than a serious thing.
Yeah, for me, what just kind of happened was that, like, I thought it was I wasn't sure if it was parody or not. Was the thing? I sat here going,
I had that battle too.
Is this an SNL version of Lethal Weapon? Like, what's happening right now? And then it very clearly makes itself aware that is later on what it is. I mean, there's one part where they're talking about the fat zombie dude that they fight in the car. And then he goes, speaking about like fat, let me tell you about my ex-wife. And then it cuts him off. Yeah, and I was like, okay, so like that's a joke where they are not letting him finish.
Right. So they know that it's kind of like an overbearing presence at times with his constant like riffs and stuff.
Exactly.
Like that.
So around that time, and then obviously as they start dealing with, we will say, are real fucking horror sequences.
Yeah.
Even if the tone doesn't sometimes take them seriously, the gore is so well done that you have to take them seriously.
Yeah.
Like your brain just does, because you're sitting there, and I found myself constantly disarmed by this movie because, because like you're expecting something just so silly and the characters aren't taking anything seriously. Like in that opening shootout, like he's riffing while like cops are just being murdered right beside him.
Yeah, exactly.
and you're sitting there going like, dude, I feel like you should be taking this a little seriously. Like so many people are getting shot at, and it's the first time also where I couldn't figure out what was happening because it just has this awesome effect of, this is obviously excessive 80s action cheese.
Oh, yeah.
So they're firing at these two dudes, And I'm sitting there going, why aren't these guys going down? Oh, I'm like, oh, it's just an 80s action movie. That's why they're not going down.
Yeah.
Like, that's just all it is. And then it's like, oh no, they're not going down because they're already dead, and that's actually part of the plot. And Joe Piscopo even says, man, like what's going on here? Like maybe it's Treat Williams who says that, what's going on here? And because Piscopo always has to be riffing, and he goes, it's just a flesh wound or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And they're firing them down. But when they kill those guys, the one zombie pulls out a grenade, and again, it's hard to describe them as zombies because they don't actually. They're a little sort of like fleshy and gross, but they're not like.
They almost get. It's
they're
weird
not like
too.
Night
They
of the
get
Creeps.
more zombified as the movie goes because these two first robbers don't really look zombified.
No,
at all.
they just have like clammy skin, basically. Like they look like they're in the process of being zombified. So you don't. Again, you don't totally know that.
Which makes sense because they deteriorate as it goes, as the film goes. So
yeah, but when the one pulls out the grenade and Piscopo shoots his arm, and the guy goes, "Uh-oh," and then just full like chunky explosion flies over, hits everyone. The gore's disgusting.
And then Roger takes the car and just runs into the dude and pins him into another one.
Dude, and the dummy is so good.
It basically explodes.
It's like it's a dummy with like squibs on it as it gets pinned into the car, so and blood flies.
Just splatters everywhere.
God, it's so
insane.
Good.
And the thing is too is that these guys don't know that they're like these super zombified whatever. So those deaths that they just did for those robbers are just so gruesome. I mean, these robbers are going in for it. They're trying to kill everybody.
Oh yeah.
But it was just. It's crazy to see these cops like run into a criminal.
All the guys on the sidelines are like rolling their eyes. They're like, God damn it! They just fucking exploded and murdered our suspects.
So no interrogation.
Yeah.
Well, there is reference before that point when they're headed over there in the car to it's our guys again, and they do talk about this series of violent robberies that have been going on with people that they don't seem to be able to stop.
Right.
And so I think, Roger's whole thing here is like, I'm not letting these guys get away, even if I have to completely obliterate them with a car.
Yeah.
Which he does very effectively.
Very effectively.
No, absolutely. And they find out anyway, based on these corpses, which they take to the morgue, and I do think the morgue sequence is pretty funny.
This one, Joe actually did get a good joke off this one, where they open up the body and he goes, "Hey, nice shot, Roger." And it's just like the open dead body with all the gun wounds.
Yeah, well, and I also like how Treat Williams just like completely throws it away and just goes thanks, and then immediately like pivots to like continuing the conversation. But before they do that, and they're just looking at for some reason they're just looking at the corpses like for fun or something.
Yeah.
And Joe Piscopo's talking about how they celebrate birthdays. You should celebrate death days. And Treat Williams just like lifts up like a thing and looks at like just a torso and a head. That's all it is. That's underneath there. And then he immediately just like puts it back down, covers it back up.
It's just shredded as well. The thing that he's looking at.
Yeah. Oh, just
very gory.
Yeah, and there's the line Joe Piscopo gets to when they look at the corpses, and he's just like, "You have the right to remain disgusting."
Yeah, it's something like that. I can't remember it though.
Yeah, but either way, they uncover through these corpses that they have been chock full of some sort of chemical, the mortician tells them. And then they find out that chemical has just been bought in large quantities, we'll say, by Dante Pharmaceuticals.
Right.
So
great reference.
They head on over to Dante Pharmaceuticals, where the desk guy is just reading Playboy.
Yeah. And I do like the "sorry to interrupt your erection, pal" that line. Yeah. Pretty classic 80s right there too.
And they get a tour from the PR girl, who is played by Lindsay Frost.
I don't know why, but she looks familiar. Have you seen her in anything else? Has she been in some stuff?
Honestly, the only other thing I think I've seen her in is The Ring.
Okay.
The 2002 Ring, so she was kind of a bit of an older...
Maybe it was just her face, yeah.
But as they kind of make their way through Dante Pharmaceuticals, again, there's some more riffing. Joe Piscopo is chasing after the little intern in her lab coat or whatever, and they're like, "Nope, you're sticking with us, bro." And then I think he says, "I gotta go pee pee," and that's how he separates himself from the tour.
And he gets himself
Very
out of there to do
professional
some detective work.
That's right.
Yeah, he's got to do some real detective work there. And
that's when he discovers the resurrection machine.
The resurrection machine.
And this is where things get.
It's actually a pretty good set too.
Yeah, I liked it. And this is where things get like super interesting. This is when I started to become completely engaged.
As soon as the resurrected like fat biker gets up
with like 3 noses and like,
he's got like
crazy.
3 faces stitched together like some sort of like Texas Chainsaw mask or something like that.
Which honestly doesn't make much sense.
No.
Like with the rest of the film, because there's no talk of experimentation or like, fusing faces together or anything like that. He's really the only zombie with like a deformity that's that extreme. So, but it doesn't matter because it's a great effect.
Yeah, I mean,
don't think too hard about it.
The makeup on him looks amazing, and he's massive, and he's just like throwing Joe Piscopo around.
It's awesome.
And I was actually sort of shocked by, and I mean, because I didn't really look up the film. If I would have looked up the film, I probably would not have been shocked because it's the premise of the film. But I was shocked actually at the bit where Treat Williams gets stuck in the sort of room where the guy presses the button and it sucks the air out of the room and it basically like strangles him.
Yeah, me too.
And he just dies.
I thought it was going to be more of just a set piece moment where it was like, Joe fights the guy and then gets him out, but it ends up being the entire plot basically.
Yeah, well, it's like 15 minutes into the movie and Treat Williams is dead. And he's like the main character. Yeah. And I was like, what? And I actually thought Treat Williams does a pretty good job in this movie.
Yeah, me too.
He also did get a little bit more of a character and a little bit more of an arc
Joe
to deal
really
with.
is just the funny guy. Like, he really just is the partner that's kind of...
there to riff with him.
Yeah.
There to have a good time.
Exactly.
Which is very important, apparently, for, like, the end of the film, which we'll kind of get to. It's a very important plot development that these guys have been riffing for.
That brings brothers together, man. Jokes.
Hey, we know that on this show.
Yeah, exactly. It's so good.
They're loving life, these guys.
Oh yeah.
Well, I do like the fact that that Roger being killed does not impede the making jokes about everything all the way through.
Yeah.
If anything, I feel that it ramps Roger's willingness to make jokes about things up to the next level.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's something I noticed is that no one takes any death really seriously in this, even before they know about the resurrection machine. I mean, when Roger dies, there is one little scene that Joe gets where he kind of like it's just sad.
Yeah.
And just kind of like, oh, he's dead. I think he says something like he died like dogs died or something, which is a pretty heavy line. Yeah. But
because he's died in the chamber that they use to euthanize animals that they've been testing.
Right. And then, but as soon as they find the machine, it goes right back to like, I'm going to riff about everything, even though I'm not sure if this will bring Roger back. I'm still in my riff mode.
Yeah, if anything, Joe got excited by the fact that he had more content to riff off. He's like, man, I had so many dead jokes just waiting.
Yeah.
And I can use them all.
This is great.
This is awesome. Either way, definitely when I looked up Joe Piscopo and I saw that he was most known for SNL, I was like, all right.
Oh yeah, it totally makes sense.
And when I looked him up on YouTube, the first thing I found was him doing like a really shitty parody of a rap on The Tonight Show.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, all right. But as they find this resurrection machine, and for some reason, they call in the mortician lady to just be there. And for some reason, she's super cool with the idea of just reanimating Treat Williams.
She's
like
very
literally, a movie like this made now.
They chuck him in there, and she's just like, "Yeah, let's just have a go with this thing."
Yeah, like you would
push some buttons.
You would think another version of this movie would actually spend a longer amount of time thinking that Treat Williams was going to be dead. Or just thinking having Joe Piscopo, but literally it's the next scene. Like, Joe Piscopo was like, man, he died. And then they go into the resurrection room and they're like, you want to put him in the machine and see what happens?
Yeah. I like how they're just kind of like all shoulders about it. Just like, Might as well try. Might as well give it a go.
Oh yeah, and I also forgot to mention I really like the part where when shit hits the fan and the reanimated biker comes back, the desk guy immediately pulls out a gun and starts trying to shoot the
I'm
cops.
a bad guy. Yeah.
I just remember that being I remember me going, what?
Yeah.
Like there's so many. The one thing about this is there are a lot of bad riffs, but there's like a riff every 3 seconds that at a certain point,
and it's not
like
just within the dialogue,
they do become
right?
overwhelming and they start to work on you.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's just overbearing riffs to the point where it has to work on you. It's like what's that, like Stockholm syndrome?
Yeah.
Or whatever, where you sit there and you just take it until you like it.
Yeah, well, and they talk about briefly the idea of reanimating the corpses, and I think Joe Piscopo is the one who has the line where he's like, "What about the soul, Becky?"
Yeah.
But they reanimate
She's
him.
just like, they figured that out.
Yeah.
That's the way to write it off.
Yeah. But they reanimate him, and he's just like, "Hey, man, I actually feel pretty good. Nothing's happened." And they were like, "Dude, you were dead. You have no heartbeat." And they have 3 people check his heartbeat, and they're like, "Yeah, man, there's nothing there." He's like, "Yeah, man, this thing's just got to be broken."
Yeah.
That's what it is. No problems here, man. I'm just, I'm good. But then he gets told that he is dead, and he's only reanimated briefly. He has 10 hours, basically, before he's going to turn into soup.
Yeah.
He's just going to slowly deteriorate.
It's kind of like Mel Gibson in Edge of Darkness, except instead of radiation poisoning, he's just rotting.
Yeah. And then Joe Piscopo has the idea of like, well, can't we just like reheat him, like put him back in? And they were like, it's not a toaster oven, Doug. Even though I
like the idea,
plot wise, we did just use it as a toaster oven, basically.
Well, I gotta say, personally, I have a certain amount of affection for movies knowing when to sort of bother saying this matters or this doesn't matter. And I think a really prominent example from the last, I have a feeling this movie came out further ago than I think it did, but the great example is like in Looper, when they sit down and they're talking to each other, the two Bruce Willises, and he says, "Well, how can you be here talking to me?" And he says, "Look, I could make you a bunch of diagrams and join things up with string and everything. We don't have time for that shit." And
don't think about it. Just enjoy the movie.
Wonderfully artful way of saying, this doesn't really matter. And something that I was kind of thinking about both of these movies, because I had watched a movie recently that was from Point Grey Pictures, which is Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg's production company.
Oh, right.
So they made This Is the End and The Interview, and I think recently I watched a movie called Long Shot.
Oh yeah, I watched that. That was the one with Charlize Theron in it, I think.
Yeah, and Seth Rogen, and it's ostensibly a political comedy. But what I think that all of those movies do really well is that they seem to have the overriding ethos of the main thing that matters is that this is fun. They don't get too hung up on the idea of we need to have a satisfying and realistic resolution to James Franco killing Kim Jong-un. They just get to the end and they make a joke out of it where they say, "Oh, this stupid thing that he said earlier in the movie about a SEAL team coming and spiriting them away from the country where they will be heroes, that just happened, and then everything's fine." And it's a similar thing for that Long Shot movie. They get to the end of that and they go, "And she's the president now, and he's the dude." And they're making jokes about it because that shit, frankly, it doesn't really matter what happens after this point. And I have a certain affection for movies just kind of being willing to say, you know what, we're kind of more concerned this is fun for you, and getting super hung up on the details, basically.
Yeah, and that's definitely this.
Yeah,
movie.
I ended up liking that Long Shot movie for a movie that has the implicit premise that like compromise in a relationship is the same thing as compromise in politics, which I just think is a fundamentally untrue thing. But I had a good time with that movie, especially Skarsgård riffing on Justin Trudeau. That guy deserved to get taken down a peg.
Oh, does
Skarsgård plays the Canadian Prime Minister, and it's such a riff on Justin Trudeau's sort of fake kindness that
I'll definitely watch that movie.
It's brutal. It's brutal. I mean, as Canadians, you got to know we need to get some Justin Trudeau riffs out there. So anyone who's doing it,
absolutely, we do.
But before we digress too far here, returning back to Dead Heat, which I do think Andrew is right that like again, the whole reanimating process and the premise of he's just back and he's a dead cop now and we're gonna continue on whatever this conspiracy is. Like they get past that in like 5 seconds. And, and
they walk out and they're like, that's weird. You were dead though. And he's like,
you're dead now, man. It's cool.
Let's crack this case.
They're making jokes they're driving away from the place where Roger has just been resurrected. And he's saying, I don't get it though, because I feel great. I feel like I could run the Boston Marathon. They're like, well, you couldn't because it's not open to dead people. They're just like immediately just cracking jokes about it. You know, like they're making jokes about him. Like the next place that they go to, like a couple of zombies come in with Uzis and try to assassinate the girl from the lab.
Yeah, they go to the PR girl's house, her mansion. And the zombies come in wielding Uzis. And there's a lot of like really great squib work here, because this is the first time you get the hint of two zombies shooting at each other.
Yeah, and I love it because they're basically indestructible, so it's just constant bullets.
It's
flying.
So excessive. It's such an easy excuse to just be even more excessive than because this is the first scene where like Treat Williams is just getting like mowed down by Uzis and like it's not affecting him. He's
got bullet wounds everywhere and it's
running out of the room and getting shot in the back like 6 times on the way out.
It's also where they introduce Vincent Price, who shows up on the TV as the rich industrialist who is supposedly the father or sort of the mentor figure for the PR woman. But when the zombies show up, they just have this. It's probably one of the weaker action films in the scene in the film, but that's not really saying much. It's because all of the action scenes in the film that aren't this one are like crazy good.
Yeah.
But this sequence, he ends up killing one by throwing the radio in the jacuzzi. Joe Piscopo just punches the zombie in the dick like 10 times.
Like 10 times. Yeah.
And there's one joke in here though that blew my mind, and I had to sit here. I had to think about it because I couldn't figure out what the joke was for a long time, because it's shortly after Joe Piscopo stabs the one zombie with the patio umbrella, throws him down into the pool, I think.
Yeah.
And then the other guy is in the jacuzzi underwater with the radio. And Treat Williams at one point during the set piece is underwater for a long period of time. Because he's dead. He doesn't need the oxygen anymore, so he's all good. And Joe Piscopo says, "You were underwater in that jacuzzi for 5 straight minutes." And he says, "I got to teach my girlfriend how to do that." And I heard that. And this might just be me, but my first thought was, does he want to just drown his girlfriend? Like, is that what he wants to imagine drowning his girlfriend? And then I was like, oh no, he wants his girlfriend to blow him in the jacuzzi.
Yeah.
That was the joke. Okay.
Yeah. You were focusing too much on the zombies.
Yeah.
Also, I thought the makeup on the zombies in this sequence was very nice in that they're not. Because, like we've sort of established in this, you can resurrect somebody if the person has been dead for a while. It seems to make them dumb and suggestible, and you can send them off to do errands and rob banks and kill people and that kind of stuff.
So we have someone at Dante Pharmaceuticals is resurrecting thugs so that they can do some crimes around the city. Yeah. That's kind of like the main thing that we're sort of getting breadcrumbs as we move along here.
Yeah.
But you're right. The one guy kind of looks like Jeff Goldblum in The Fly.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
They don't look like say a zombie from The Walking Dead or Zack Snyder's Day of the Dead or anything like that. They just look kind of grotesque.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just look very kind of like they're covered in boils and sort of gross, and
I will
their
say
skin's
there is,
peeling
like,
off a little bit.
Not that it matters because the film never focuses too hard on it, and I don't really care. But I will say it's not very consistent with like how the whole process works. You know, like
most of them
certain
look
zombies,
different.
Yeah, like we have later on we have I think her name's Randy. She's the PR girl or whatever. When she starts to deteriorate,
one of the most horrifying sequences.
And it's
in the movie,
fantastic.
though.
The effects are great. Like when her face starts to droop,
half her face.
Oh,
melts.
that was so effective. It was fantastic. But what I found is I was like, there's no consistency to this because she's deteriorating in a matter of like a minute. I guess she does have something that she says where she made a deal with them so she could last longer or something. But it's all very vague. That's what I'm kind of getting at. It's not really spelled out for you. It's pretty inconsistent when it comes to that.
Right. Yeah, it's not a you don't really get the feeling that there is a thoroughly fleshed out series of internal rules.
Not that it matters really. The film's not trying to focus on that at all, but it just was something I was thinking about.
They were kind of like, what's an excuse to get all these different kinds of gore gags, basically. Yeah. Like I feel like they just said go nuts to this makeup artist.
I feel like
they were just like, what's something cool that you can come up with and how can we write our way there?
Yeah, for sure.
Because like that's absolutely what happened with the Chinese butcher shop sequence.
Let's get to that.
So they go from the PR lady's house to the Chinese butcher shop because this is where they have sold them whatever. This is where the chemical was sold to Dante Pharmaceuticals from. And they go there and they turn on the resurrection machine inside the butcher shop and it starts resurrecting all of the fucking butchered animals. Yeah, the poultry. There's fucking pigs, there's chickens, there's fish.
Yeah.
And then in the biggest one and the craziest one, obviously the cow carcass.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I don't know
when
how. I honestly don't know how they did this because it didn't look like stop motion to me.
No,
like
that looked like
way
a
better than stop motion.
Yeah, that looked like a legitimate animatronic or something like that. Or
it's crazy.
Maybe someone in like a suit mixed with some animatronics. I'm not sure, but But
watching all these skinned dead animals in a butcher shop just come to life and start fucking with them.
And I love these little gags they do throughout it. Like I think one time, like Joe, as he's struggling with one of them, he throws them into one of the meat grinders, and then the meat grinder goes.
Yeah.
He turns around, and there's a duck that looks surprised, and then he shoots his head off. Like, this scene was absolutely batshit.
Yeah. And it comes out of nowhere, and you're like, what?
It's so high energy, and just it's so bizarre compared to everything else. And I mean, the movie itself is bizarre, but this scene really stands out with its
and again, they don't really feel the need to answer the question, why do you have a resurrection machine in the light fitting of a Chinese restaurant? And that's fine. The big shirtless butcher that's standing there when they first come in, you may recognize him, Professor Toru Tanaka, as Sub-Zero from The Running Man.
Oh, hey, I did not recognize that, but that is cool. We actually just did The Running Man not that long ago, so I totally remember Sub-Zero. He's the one with the hockey stick.
Yeah, that's killer.
Yeah, he was also a professional wrestler with the WWF during the 1960s.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Hell yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's good stuff.
Used to team up with Mr. Fuji.
Cool.
They both played Japanese foreign devils, and they were both just from Hawaii.
Right, so he went from that to having to listen to Joe Piscopo go, suddenly I've lost my appetite. That's it, I'm going vegetarian.
Yeah.
This little piggy's going to market.
I loved it. Oh, I loved it. It was just
he says all of those lines within
80s.
like 20 seconds of each other.
The riffs, man, they're nonstop.
He could not stop.
Yeah, he was like, I almost wanted a scene where like Joe's character goes insane and just can't stop doing riffs. Like, like it's an ending scene in him like in an asylum, and he's just like, I'm a vegetarian now. Like just starts riffing the whole thing.
Maybe we can drown it in A1 sauce.
Every line he has in this scene.
But like you said, though, I mean, tonally, that sort of thing does actually have that kind of cumulative effect. It makes me think of like makes me think of stand-up comedians like Stephen Wright and Mitch Hedberg, where their entire acts are just non sequitur one-liners, but delivered with this like regularity that sort of builds to an entirely different thing. And like you're saying, in a movie like this, if just all the way through, absolutely nonstop, no matter what's happening, the two main characters are just riffing on it the entire time.
Yeah, and I could see how how people might have found that annoying. I know that this film did bomb. It played in theaters for like 1 week, and then no one talked about it again, basically.
Yeah.
But I did think that when it ramped up into the horror and they were still doing it is kind of what ended up working for me, mostly just because, again, in a buddy cop movie, they would have this attitude all the time. Like a lot of time in buddy cop movies, that attitude is what like makes them get through the harder parts of their job.
Yeah.
They're, a lot of times they're just like, this is how, we're kind of like bad dudes, but this is like kind of how we stay sane in kind of like the things that we're asked to do.
And I think
so while doing that, but the things that they're trying to stay sane through are so much fucking crazier. The fact that they're riffing just kind of gets crazier. Just kind of actually made sense to me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I think that the other thing that's very notable about this is that as time goes on through the movie, Roger starts to decompose. And after he's been shot a bunch of times, Doug suggests to him that he change his clothes because being covered in bullet holes isn't a great disguise. So he gets some more clothes and gets himself changed, and he brushes his hair, and he starts to notice like big clumps of hair coming out.
Oh yeah.
He's looking really pallid, so he buys some makeup from a drugstore to try and disguise like how pallid he's looking. But over the course of the film, as he is deteriorating more and more, he also starts really leaning into just being able to absorb like unlimited amounts of damage from people.
Yeah.
And all of this kind of leads to, like you were saying, they have split up at some point. They've gone to check in on Vincent Price's mausoleum for clues. They come back to Roger's house and find that he's been murdered.
And they don't, it's not they don't present it as the saddest scene either, which I found
which is funny. When I saw it, I was confused by that, but then I was like, oh, when the climax happened, I was like, that's why. Of course he was going to come back.
Yeah.
But I was sitting there going, it would be super weird if Joe Piscopo just died and they found him hung upside down in a fish tank.
Because it looks like a brutal death.
Yeah.
Like
and they were just like, man.
They kind of just brush it off at first.
Oh yeah, like she immediately goes into the shower and he follows her and he's like, "Damn, sexy lady in the shower," and then she melts right in front of him, which is one of the craziest visual effects in the movie too.
And they have her head like talk to him before it deteriorates completely too. That's a pretty cool effect.
And her arm also melts off first.
Yeah.
Like her arm drops, and then when she falls, her head smashes the ground and like falls off.
Yeah,
too.
They show you like with steps. It's very clear.
Yeah,
how
her
the
deterioration process is like very vivid.
Yeah,
like it's very you see every moment of it. Like her face melting, her like skin like actually like peeling back and revealing like more of the skull and stuff like that, but it just happens in like a really fast time frame.
Yeah.
And I also really like the line where because Andrew was talking about it, how he's like absorbing all these bullets and stuff like that. At one point, Randy says to him, where she saw that he got shot in the back by a bunch of the Uzis. She's like, "You're hurt." He says, "Lady, I'm fucking dead." Which Treat Williams actually does deliver it well, so it actually got a pretty good laugh out of me when he says that one.
Yeah, it's good. And then it. Go ahead, Andrew.
I was just gonna say, as we sort of get towards the crescendo of the movie, which
the last
is
15-20 minutes or whatever, which is, I kid you not, I think it's one of the best 15 minutes I've ever seen in a movie.
Oh yeah, it's so high energy.
Yeah, so basically they've established that the entire plot here is that Vincent Price is actually still alive, and he's been conspiring with a group of very rich people to prolong their own lives.
Yeah, because they're like, what's the point in making all this money and hoarding it all if by the time you die you just have to give it away? He's just like, you should just be able to keep hoarding it forever, which
God
is
wants us to live forever.
yeah. Well, and I was just gonna say, Vincent Price's monologue, by the way, he does not just take that paycheck; he delivers that monologue.
Yeah, it's awesome.
He kind of just he comes in and he's like, "Ladies and gentlemen."
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, he goes right into it, and it's great. And
God,
so
what a
basically,
legend, Vincent Price.
Yeah.
So where we wind up at the climax of the movie is that,
Which is kicked off, by the way, by the bit in the ambulance, right? Where they put Treat Williams in the ambulance, and then he basically he puts the gear into neutral so that he can he can go down the hill, and he's sitting there going, "Oh, this is awesome!" And he's riding as fast as he could. He nails a fucking car or whatever.
Yeah,
explodes, and then he comes out. And it was clearly this explosion was just an excuse to get him into his final makeup. Yeah, where he looks like a combination.
Into his roasted form.
Yeah, he looks like a combination of like Two-Face and like the Terminator, basically.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
That bit especially is just like where it kicks off with the finale, because he finds out that, the police chief or, someone who's like in the office with him was involved.
I think it's like the doctor of the morgue place or something.
Oh, that's
like
what
that.
It is. Yeah. So he's because he's probably been giving him the corpses,
right?
I guess.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
To reanimate.
And my favorite joke in this entire film is in this scene where he just starts shooting all the security guards. Yeah. And then one of them comes up, and one of the guards is a zombie as well.
This is the best gag in the movie.
So they just start shooting at each other with Uzis, and it just keeps cutting back and forth nonstop to them shooting each other. I was laughing so hard.
Gut laughter.
I could not even believe it. And then afterwards, he pushes the guy into that room, pops a grenade, and then shoots the door closed. Because he's just so everything is so excessive in this moment, and it's I laughed so hard.
That little shot, he hits the button and the door starts closing. He tosses the grenade in, and just before the door's completely closed, he just kind of leans around.
Shots.
That's more rounds in there. But I think so. At this point, it's when he's done the whole ambulance thing that he is just at this point completely leaning into what I would describe as zombie cop chaos mode.
Because they killed his best friend. They killed the PR girl who he
has
liked.
Nothing to lose.
Yeah, so he's like, I'm just going to go fucking destroy Dante Pharmaceuticals. Like, that's it. Like, he literally rides a motorcycle into a chain, launches through the glass door off of the chain, like that joke from Bill and Ted where they drive the car and then they just smash the curb and fly into the house. It's the exact same joke that they do here where he flies into the pharmaceuticals, except he goes full like John Woo mode right when he does that, and he's like in the air like firing guns already and stuff like that.
It's great.
But yeah, that gag.
I also love that he at this point, it's almost as if his character, he was the straight man the whole time, right? Yeah. And now he's just cracking jokes. He's basically Joe, except now he's zombified and kicking ass.
Yeah, he's doing one-liners.
So that I like too, is that his character's arc is to basically just become another wisecracking cop because he's just like so, I guess, I don't know, nihilistic at this point or whatever
but
it is.
Just with the bullet absorption powers.
Yeah, exactly.
Which that is the best gag in the film, because it is literally like 1 minute of them just unloading into each other. I
couldn't believe how long it went for. I laughed so hard.
It cuts back like 6 times between the two of them, and it's just like, that guy just took 20 bullets, that guy just took 20 bullets.
They're just taking the bullets, too. There's like blood going everywhere. Oh, it's
just
so
an all-timer like horror and action movie gag.
Yeah, one of my favorites for sure.
But this leads us into, he gets into the room with all the rich people. He starts going nuts on them. The one guy who is like the head of the morgue or whatever, and he's just like, well, how are you going to deal with me when you're too busy dealing with him, or something like this. He reveals that inside the resurrection machine where they were having the meeting in front of it for some reason, like they were treating it like a boardroom table, which I didn't totally figure that part out. But
it was because Vincent Price was going to prove that it was worth getting half of everybody's fortune by doing a resurrection right in front of them.
Right.
And so of course he brings back Doug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's been dead for longer, so his brain's a little bit more malleable. And he seems like as a person, his brain might have been just a little bit more malleable in the first place.
I also like,
Yes.
I don't know, there's something about where he's just like, kill this guy, would you? And then Doug responds, kill this guy, would you?
Yeah.
Like that kind of shit. And he just keeps repeating stuff. It's very simple, but I enjoyed the touch.
Well, because at that point, like, it's just been very clear that Joe Piscopo has been overacting the entire time.
Yeah.
But at this point, like, the movie itself is, like, overacting. Like, it's so insane. It's so over the top that, like, there's no point in any kind of realistic acting at that point.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing in the movie that...
And then,
would work.
I gotta say, it's pure 80s, like, this joke, but just the fact that what brings Doug back is the, like, brings out your eyes, that whole joke. Like, it was a little eye-rolly, but it was so just time capsule. You know, it's such an 80s joke.
Well,
and for it to be a major plot point.
Yes, that's
where the joke really is, because that's
difference.
so funny.
Because
like,
all of their stupid jokes that the movie has been, like, even the movie has been like,
because
this
that
is
makes it
eye-rolly.
also that the movie's been aware of these dumb jokes to
Yeah.
the point where they know they've been excessive. It's the thing that brings him back to humanity.
Yeah.
So I think they know what they're doing.
Like, the
at
idea
least.
that all of those stupid jokes that we've been subjected to are so meaningful to their friendship.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's some heart in this shit, man.
It's the link between them.
Yeah, exactly.
But
And then
beautiful.
they kill everybody and they walk out of the room together into a corridor that's filling with mist and white light.
yeah,
they
but
say-
we have to say, though, because the next best gore gag in the entire movie,
Oh, yes.
they approach the guy to kill them, the guy who's been behind this the whole time. It's been Vincent Price has been the money behind it, but the guy actually behind it has been this morgue guy.
Oh yeah, taking the bodies.
And they approach him, and he's just, he's shooting Uzis at them, trying to prevent them from coming forward. And Vincent Price is in the background, huddling in the corner, going, "Why can't you kill them?"
forever, forever.
But in order to avoid getting killed, he just shoots his head off. His own head off. He just commits suicide right in front of them, and they go, "Oh no, fuck you,
Yeah,
fuck you!" If you think that
you
you're
took it away from me.
So they put him back into the resurrection machine. They're electrocuting him. He's coming back to life. It's like a really gross scene from like Reanimator when he reanimates that head, and it's like, ah! So they're doing that to him, and then they go, "You know what?
Let's
What if we pressed it again? What if we just reanimated him
resurrect
twice?"
him twice.
And he just fucking explodes everywhere.
Whole body.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like parts or what, it's just boom.
Literally,
whole
it's like the
body
scanner's head explosion, but with the whole body.
Yeah, the whole thing. I couldn't believe it.
No, it's completely repulsive and chunky and awesome.
Yep.
And I was surprised
Fantastic.
when I went and read about the film that this movie had gore cut out of it.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, I want to see all the deleted
Yeah,
stuff.
so I want to see the deleted scenes too.
I
But
wonder, is that out there? Is there like
I
a
don't know if
director's
it's out
cut?
there, but I was watching this and I was like, this is like a really gross movie, and apparently they had to cut it down. This is the R movie. When it was originally put in, they got an X rating, and that was how they had to cut it
Dude.
down. So
I want to see the X-rated version.
yeah, I'm assuming it includes
So
that,
bad.
that head blowing off, because it does feel like they cut away from that.
That's true. Like they don't show the doctor really. There's no violence to his suicide or
Yeah.
anything like that.
But yeah, and then they walk out into the white light again, still fucking riffing.
Yeah. They end with the riff where it's like, I think this is the end of a beautiful friendship.
Yep.
Or something like that.
Just yeah, man. And then
And at
Riffing
that
all the
point,
way to
once again,
heaven.
it's a little eye rolly, but at that point, I've been charmed. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I'm totally like, I love all your stupid ass riffs. Please.
oh yeah, at
This was your
that
friendship,
point, the
the heart
fact
of
that
it.
they're bad is like kind of why they're
Great.
good at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And then it has, an 80s pop rock song that they somehow made for the movie because it says Dead Heat in it.
Oh, nice.
Does say that, doesn't it? Running at a dead heat.
Yeah, running at a dead heat, man. But anyway, entering the
beautiful.
reductive rating round, man, this one, it gets the 4. It does. It gets
Yeah.
it gets there. I
Yes,
wasn't
it
sure
does.
about it because when I finished watching it, I was like, oh, well, that was just dumb.
Yeah.
So I 3'd it because I had a really good time, but it was dumb. And then I went back to it and I thought about it and I was like, I was describing it to someone else. And I was like, that ripped.
It's like, I want to show people that.
Yeah, like straight up, I was just like, I found just the fact that, again, it is such a perfect merging of what is the buddy cop excessive 80s action movie with like full out like repulsive body horror, and I found the constant interplay between those genres and the fact that those genres like contradict each other because they're just not something like the idea of people riffing through a body horror sequence like literally doesn't make sense. Like it's just like it's so nonsensical that when I saw it here, the fact that this makes it work, like I was constantly like shocked by it and surprised by it in ways that I found both like gross and funny. So honestly, you would think that it would undermine the horror, but it really didn't. It really just like it really felt like it wasn't a body horror movie infected by people being stupid and funny. It felt like it was a stupid funny movie infected by body horror sequences, which sounds like a pointless like a hypocritical thing, but like it's not. Like it's just that's the way that the movie actually plays. Yeah. So while I was sitting there watching it, like the dumb, stupid comedy stuff actually didn't end up ruining this movie for me. It actually just disarmed me and didn't leave me prepared for its absolutely like insanely repulsive stuff that it actually goes for. Because again, the special effects are amazing. I think that Mark Goldblatt actually has a solid grasp on how to shoot and cut action. And then again, to have, one of the best VFX artists of, the 80s kind of like working with him, and then a cinematographer who knows what to do. So it's just like, even though we'll say in terms of characterization and maybe, some of the acting, a little light. And I will say the writing, like Terry Black is very clearly Shane Black's less talented brother. But, I think as a merging of all of these different elements, some into like a weird like boiling pot. Somehow this works.
It all works. Yeah.
So I can't wait to show this to people. Basically, like I'm psyched. I'm glad Andrew brought it. So.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm gonna for it as well. I do feel like people could, it's one of those films where the cheese really starts to work like halfway through, and it can be. If you don't know what to expect and you don't like 80s cheese, it's going to be a bit difficult to get through, like the first half an hour. Yeah. But like we were talking about, by the end of the film, when they're going into heaven after this bizarre finale, and they're still riffing and still doing these bad jokes, but now you find it like charming. I think that's on purpose, and that's hard to do, and. As cheesy as some of these lines are, I think it comes full circle and it works really well once you see the ending and the fact that they use it as a character plot moment.
It's like the only character thing they do in the movie is using. Remember all those riffs that we've been doing for 80 minutes?
But I also love that they ended up making them somehow meaningful. You know, it's not the most meaning, but it just makes me laugh that they actually took the time to take all these riffs that they're aware of and then make it into the character plot moment.
That's friendship, bro.
Yeah, where he's convinced to come back to the humanity part of his personality. So it's just
absolutely.
Yeah, it was I couldn't believe what I was watching, especially the last 30 minutes. And I will say I think Joe, although he got the worst of the dialogue, I do think he did a good job with making it not as cringy as it could be. So yeah, I had an absolute blast with this, and I would have liked to see Vincent Price a little more.
Yeah,
but his cameo is still really awesome, and he kills it. So yeah, I'll give it a 4.
Yeah, big fans of Vincent Price here, especially big fan of his character name, which is Arthur P. Loudermilk.
Yeah, that's great.
Which is just a great rich guy name, I think. Yeah. Anyway, for you, Andrew.
Look, I'm going to give it a sentimental 5 on account of this is just right up there as one of my favorite just ridiculous indulgences in terms of just weird cult movies. And like you were saying, Jamie, when all of the layering on of jokes and one-liners and everything kind of hits you halfway through, it means that it's one of those things that when you do come back and watch it again, that you are kind of warmed up to those characters from the start of the movie.
Yeah, and I actually ended up rewatching it because I wasn't sure. I 4'd it the first time and I went, "Is this a 4?" You know, because like this is pretty out there. And I rewatched it and I kind of had the similar feeling within the first half hour. I was kind of like, I don't know, maybe this isn't quite the 4. Like it's close, but then as soon as that halfway point ramps up and they start connecting all those kind of corny riffs, it just works. So
as soon as Roger's all burned and smoky, and he's like, "Fuck it."
Yeah, exactly. Especially at that point. Yeah. So,
but I think, like I said, both of these movies clearly have a sort of great affection for the various types of genres that they're trying to fold together. And I think that Dead Heat is pretty unique in the sense of being something that, like you said, Josh, isn't so much a horror movie with a dash of like cop in it. Because there are plenty of movies out there that are like, you know, a horror movie which is kind of vaguely hung on the frame of a police procedural kind of thing. And this isn't that. This is much more like a buddy cop movie about two guys who solve the case, and it even has all the same beats of like
like a conspiracy cop story kind of deal.
Yeah, uncovering something that a nefarious corporation is doing, taking revenge for your friends that got knocked off along the way. There's always an outrageous kill of the person who is like sort of heading up the whole thing at the end, and then you'll walk out and crack some jokes at the end while a Shane Black saxophone plays. You know, so it really does follow much more the actual like buddy cop blueprint. But they just happen to say also one of the cops is a zombie from about a quarter of the way through the movie.
Yeah.
And then there's just all of this other rad horror movie stuff in it. So from that perspective,
and then the guy from Videodrome gets involved.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. And so I think from that perspective, it's actually quite a unique beast in terms of the little space that it occupies, you know?
Yeah, like it's very clearly like a trash premise. Like someone went to Roger Corman and was like, "Can we get $3 million to like do like this really stupid thing?" And he was like, "Yeah, all right. I mean, like I produced some stupid shit." And then it's just like they actually just effectively made it. And I think that that's really what was it for me, as I was like I could make no argument for this on like a character or a theme level in any capacity.
No.
But I do think that this is as solidly made of trash as I've seen.
Oh yeah.
Or especially as trashy as it is, like as trashy as the writing is and the premise is. This is like, it's crazy how well this actually works.
Yeah, I can't believe it.
Yeah, and so yeah, I think it's quite a unique little creature in terms of just the combination of elements that make it what it is. Yeah. And I really sort of went back and forth between this movie, for these three movies, between Night of the Creeps, Dead Heat, and another movie called Blood Diner, which is very similar in like very similar vintage. It's from 1987. It's kind of a weird horror comedy that is, again, sort of intentionally funny in its own way, and also is just kind of batshit crazy in its performances and everything. So anybody out there, if you're looking for a similar thing to these two movies, I highly recommend Blood Diner, about some weird brothers running a vegetarian diner where they're secretly feeding corpses to all of their patrons.
That's awesome.
While stealing body parts in an effort to resurrect a Babylonian goddess.
Hell yeah.
So very, very cool, very weird movie, which I highly recommend, but very similar energy to Dead Heat in the sense that it just kind of starts off weird and then gets extremely batshit over the course of the movie.
Sweet.
All right. Well, I think that will wrap it up for this week's episode. That was Night of the Creeps from 1986 and Dead Heat from 1988. Thanks for bringing these films with you, Andrew, and thanks for joining us. If you got anything to plug, this is the place to do it.
Just the old podcast. If you like to get the odd update on Australian news and politics and Bigfoot and cryptids, falcon attacks.
Yeah, I was actually just listening to that episode the other day. I was just listening to the one that you had J.R. Hennessy on.
Yes.
Because you were saying that some guy working at the Australian airport got attacked by falcons that live inside the hangars at the airport or something like that. That's what it was?
By families of peregrine falcons who nest in the hangars.
Yeah.
Australia's crazy.
Well, yeah, and he was reading that there was like the corporation's response was to say, do you know what, guys? If you see falcon activity, put your goggles on.
We got Hitchcock's birds up in this bitch.
No, for real though,
That's
that guy
it.
got his eyes gouged. Like that was.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Holy shit! Got real.
So yeah, if you want to hear about all kinds of weird stuff like that, you can check out Bunta Vista. That's Boonta on iTunes and Stitcher and all that kind of jazz. If you want to find Spotify, if you want to find where you can get the podcast or just get the RSS feed for your own thing or whatever, just go to buntavista.com and you can find all the details there and the Patreon and the Discord and all that kind of jazz.
Yeah, we know how it is.
Yeah, people know how to find stuff.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, for our listeners, I think in 1 week's time, we are going to be back with a bonus episode for you guys. We have entered Noirvember.
Yeah.
Which is another film Twitter thing. We follow Spooktober with Noirvember. So this month we are going to... They're not all noirs, but we are going to do some... We're going to focus on a little bit of noirs this year. So we're going to do our first noir episode for November. And we are going to be doing a Samuel Fuller noir double feature. So we are going to do Pickup on South Street from 1954. And then we are also going to be doing The Naked Kiss from 1964. Both films written and directed by legendary filmmaker Samuel Fuller. And that sets us up for our free episode. So again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast for that episode next week. The week after, though, we're having a guest on, and we are going to do Sam Fuller's big one. We are going to do Shock Corridor.
Sweet.
The guest wanted to bring that on. I figured we'd get familiar with Sam Fuller before we did that, his really big one. But the guest has also paired that with Ace in the Hole, which I think is another sort of a journalism noir adjacent, possibly about reporters and cops and things of this nature. Cool. So that's what we are going to be doing in 2 weeks' time. But I think that will wrap it up. I want Jamie to end this show out by playing the Dead Heat song if he can find it somewhere.
I will. I will do that.
And the last thing I'm going to say is Vincent Price's delivery of Friends and Associates. But that will be it. That will wrap it up for this week's episode. Thanks as always for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy. Cue that music, Jamie.
Yeah. Cueing yourself from the past.
Exactly.
I'm imagining you with your headphones on in your room, just
like,
being like,
"Oh, I
fuck
will.
you,
Drop
Jamie."
that shit.
Yeah.